Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Mark Tech. I'm once again sorry for a brief intro of nothingness, but I'm trying to make it so that my stream stop cutting off the very first sentence and the very last. Hopefully, this works. I still started earlier than before I can actually see the stream on my iPad, which is always next to me. However, I do hope that this was enough of a break between clicking go live in OBS and actually going live. Didn't expect to be back so soon, but the last video did quite well for a relatively impromptu video with a weird thumbnail, and we added like 8 subscribers recently. So again, we are a very small channel. We appreciate every support we can get, and yes, I'm talking basically like Gollum because it is only me on this channel. But all support is very much welcome. Now, why am I streaming today, and hopefully not for a full hour, so that should be a little better for the algorithm? Well, iPhones are about to get even larger, so throw out your skinny jeans, guys. This is going to be big, but we are not talking about the iPhone 15 or the iPhone 15 Pro or even the iPhone 16. Technically, we are talking only about the iPhone 16 Pro and iPhone 16 Pro Max. Now, those names are still sort of unclear whether or not like the Pro Max model fully becomes the Ultra, whether it happens when the iPhone 15 rolls around, whether that happens only with the iPhone 16 series, or if that happens at all, right? Naming is always such a fickle thing. It's really hard to predict what exactly happens, even though Pro Max obviously isn't the easiest branding ever. People have gotten quite used to it, so maybe Ultra, as attractive as it might be for something like an Apple Watch, it might not make much sense to rename the iPhone that already has a successful branding solution. Okay, I'm trying to position my mouse actually over the screen I'm watching and not my OBS screen, because that would result in trouble. So when I say larger, well, what do I mean? Well, let's ask Mark Gurman. We have gotten those leaks for now about a week or something like that, and we have had like Twitter leakers and other insiders trying to corroborate it, and most importantly we have seen like Ross Young, a very reliable display analyst, also chime in. And basically I wanted to take like the latest Mark Gurmanings and use that for what I think is now likely to happen and what I think of those changes, right? So this, I don't react to rumors that are completely based on like 4chan stuff or something like that. I do wait until we have something from the likes of Mark Gurman and especially like Ross Young, and there are some leakers who don't do content that regularly but are usually pretty reliable, and even there are some Twitter leakers like Shrimp Apple Pro who I generally trust. Obviously everybody has hits and misses, and even like the front page tag guys, they do have a somewhat solid record, except when it comes to the Apple Watch apparently. So how much larger are we talking? Now, this is actually a little difficult to quantify because it's supposed to be moving up from 6.1 inches on the Pro to 6.3 inches on the 16 Pro, and then from 6.7 inches on the Pro Max to 6.9 inches on the Pro Max / Ultra. So, and as you can see, it's corroborated as once again by Ross Young, Unknown Z21, and I believe Shrimp Apple Pro also said something, but that had more to do with the sensor sizes, which we are about to get to a little later. So why does this matter? Well, because iPhones are already pretty large, and because let's be quite honest, they are also heavy, especially the Pro models. So that's why people are a little frightened by it. And obviously, just going larger, like for the sake of going larger, or even as Mark Gurman said it, to better compete with like Samsung's offerings, with the S23 Ultra, for example, being 6.9 inches. Though with a slightly different aspect ratio, it can be argued which one exactly is how much larger than the other. I always encourage people not to do percentage differences between the diagonal sizes, because those diagonal sizes aren't equivalent to the display area, and the display area also dramatically changes between screens with the same diagonal measurements but with a different aspect ratio. So a more squared 7-inch display will be much larger in area than a 7-inch display that is 2:1 or 3:1 in its aspect ratio. Regardless, obviously we quite know what the iPhone is like shaped like. It's very obviously elongated. So being larger this way suggests that it would be both wider and longer. However, that is not necessarily the case, and I apologize to everybody I might have blinded right now by not being able to put GSM Arena into dark mode. I don't know why this is the only site where I can find the cats, but regardless, this is pretty okay. I should have gone to 9to5Mac as I see it now, but for some reason, like 9to5Mac needed a lot of searching to find the right articles. So yeah, when you look at the actual measurements, this is, I believe, of the Pro, not the Pro Max or the Ultra. Or is it? No, it's of the Pro Max and the Ultra with 6.7 inches on the diagonal and 6.9. So we have 159.8 millimeters in length, and that becomes substantially longer to 165 millimeters. So that's actually a pretty substantial increase. However, when you look at the width, right, it's actually interesting because that moves from 76.7 to 77.2. This suggests, and we actually had rumors like this quite a while ago, I believe for like the iPhone 13 originally, somewhere around the time right when iPhone 12 came out or something like that, that iPhones would get an actually different aspect ratio, so that they would be longer. Now, I am actually a big fan of this decision, and part of that is the dynamic island, because the dynamic island, especially on the smaller versions, it depends obviously on the exact video content you are watching. Like 16:9 will be fine, obviously even something smaller like 4:3 will be perfectly fine. But 2:1 is pretty like borderline, right? If you, the second you zoom in on like a YouTube video, it's already problematic. And obviously everything that is like designed for like 21:9, which would be like this, is heavily cut in. Or if you then basically shrink it down, then you lose a lot of screen real estate, because the dynamic island is pretty far into the screen. This would solve it a lot. Like, assuming that distance is the same as this here, this would mean that the percentage that the dynamic island takes of the screen is, I wouldn't say substantially smaller, but especially lengthwise, it actually would be a measurable difference to the immersion factor that is taken away a little bit, like, or by the notches, by your dynamic islands. So yeah, this is a very good change in my opinion. Yeah, they only have the cats for the larger model, and this is why the dynamic island actually looks pretty small, because on the non-Max models it actually takes up a larger space percentage wise. And what I am also trying to communicate here is obviously the change in bezels. Now, not from this model to this, but you have to remember all the rumors that we have gone through over the last few months. I'm sorry I wasn't there for most of them, but the rumors that the iPhone 15 would have substantially smaller bezels than the iPhone 14 Pro, and the 14 Pro was already an improvement over the 13 Pro and the regular 14. So what this means is that the 15 series will have extremely small bezels and therefore actually have a slightly smaller footprint than the 14 Pro, and that the 16 Pro basically takes that step back and now uses the smaller bezels to give you a larger device in a very similar overall area. And that to me is actually very positive. Again, whether or not we will get like design elements changes for like a more curved back or titanium, those are still rumors for the 15 Pro, and they would also go a long way to make a larger 16 Pro more viable. Yeah, so, but why are we getting this change? Except for obviously, like, because we now can with the smaller bezels, because it will make the dynamic island still allow for a much more immersive screen, right? Even with a relatively small display change. And partially just because we live in a world where we scroll through everything, there's a lot of 2x1 content, so such a screen would be pretty beneficial for most people. Well, there is another rumor, and that has to do with just the overall size increase, because yes, it is pretty much a lot longer and it's a little bit wider, right? So it's definitely a larger device than the 15 Pro. So what is the reason for why we would need extra space? Now, we had some talks about the iPhone 16 then using a larger battery than the 15 Pro, but all rumors to that regard are still very unreliable at this point, and they're all also very generalized. We don't have rumors of like, oh, this screen will be like 5% larger, this battery will be like 5% larger or anything like that. But the one thing that we are now getting pretty clear data on is the main camera sensor. And this is actually something where I will be completely honest, and because I've been a little bit out of the rumor mill, I've been very, very busy, as I've said in my last video. That's why the break was 3 months basically between me making videos. Is we are getting a much larger camera sensor, but only in the 16 Pro, not in the 15 Pro. And as somebody who is definitely upgrading this year, because my iPhone 13 Pro is very much needed in my family, because some devices have died and or don't provide enough battery life anymore or performance. So I will be buying the iPhone 15 Ultra or Pro Max, regardless what it's called in the end, but it will not be getting a larger main sensor. That will be reserved for the iPhone 16 Pro series, and whether that applies to both the Pro and Pro Max is still a little unclear. So let's go through exactly what is being said here. Apple is reportedly planning to bring the telephoto camera to both of the Pro models. That is also a differentiating factor towards the 15 series. With the 15 series, only the 15 Pro is supposed to be getting the telephoto 3 to 6, like, I don't know, like what the exact zoom range would be and whether it's like an adaptive zoom, but let's say it's a 6x zoom, because currently the zoom is 3x, and then maybe like it only makes sense to double it at least, right? Or at the very least offer like 5x zoom. But this has only been given to being given to the 15 Pro Max and not the 15 Pro, partially because, well, it's untested technology yet for Apple, and they also probably want to maximize logistics by reusing the existing regular zoom lens on the 15 Pro. But Primarily, it's also because of size, and this is why this is an exclusive feature to basically the largest, heaviest iPhone available, and the most expensive one as well. But there is also obviously more to the sensor, to the cameras on the iPhone, except for how many cameras they are. We know we have the main, the ultra wide, and the a zoom camera, which goes from like a regular zoom to now a telephoto setup, but also the main sensor sizes, or the sensor sizes in general, are very important to the camera quality. And this is why the current sensor size is 1 by 1.28 inches. Now, to those of you who don't know, the smaller this second number, right, it's divided by almost, right? The smaller this number, the larger the sensor. For example, Samsung is like about by 1.3, while we have some Xiaomi phones and I believe like the latest Huawei phones and something like that, they are pretty much by 1 or by 1.11. So they have very small, very large sensors that you can basically call a full 1-inch sensor, as do the latest Sonys. And that has actually been part of the rumors that the 15 Pro Max would get the largest Sony sensor, which would be like a 50 megapixel sensor that is about this size, right? Not the full 1 inches, but this is pretty much exactly that. Like everything like going from here in like 10% differences, like the computational aspect of photography will have a larger impact on camera quality than sensor size changes of this magnitude, right? It's not like we are going from 1 by 1.5 to by 1 by 1.2. So there is I wouldn't say it sucks, right, to be getting still the same sensor on the 15 Pro, but definitely I would have preferred to have gotten this. However, with how Apple's also like computational photography works, they test it for quite a long time internally. So sometimes they use I would say substantially older sensors, by which I mean sensors that are like 6 to 9 months behind the rest of the industry, sometimes even a full year. And that's, well, except when you compare it to Samsung, which for some reason has now also not been very aggressive in terms of sensor size, but that's neither here nor there. But yeah, this would be a pretty typical Apple move to not jump to the largest sensor available, and we have seen that time and time again. Even like before jumping to like pixel binning, other Android vendors had not just pixel bin sensors, but those sensors were generally quite a bit larger than Apple's 12 megapixel sensors, and still Apple was, and even Google before they were changing to pixel binning, had a much smaller sensor than the rest of the industry, but they had the best computational photography. Apple had probably the best mix of computational and sensor size, and then other vendors like Xiaomi had to rely almost exclusively on sensor size and better optics, though that is always questionable, to provide something comparable. So I'm a little rambling right now because I was somebody who was very excited to be getting a larger sensor for the main camera in the iPhone 15 Pro. Or 15 Pro Max to be more precise. Now, interestingly, they are saying that this will be for the 16 Pro Max, at least as it's said here, right? Which kind of makes sense if you consider then that the iPhone 16 Pro would get the telephoto camera, but that means that that telephoto camera takes up a larger internal space inside the Pro than it does in the Ultra. So there are still more size advantages to be leveraged in the Ultra, especially if the Ultra is already built upon the concept that the previous generation had or had telephoto sensors, or telephoto setup to be more precise. So this is supposedly the main change that we are seeing here, and quite honestly, I like it. I know that a lot of people have like jumped on like the old iPhone 5 meme where it's like a meter long or something like that. But I think that this changes, especially in combination with the smaller bezels that we are getting, are very sensible, and this is a internal size increase that is being leveraged for something positive. This is, and something beyond just larger battery or even like more cooling for the processor. Obviously, those things benefit much more from thicker devices than just larger devices. But yeah, cameras are the one thing on the iPhone that are always getting larger, and are getting larger disproportionately to the iPhone. Not just because we have larger individual cameras, but we also have more cameras. We will now have like differently built cameras with the telephoto. Maybe we will have like adjustable zoom, which would probably need also like different internal size requirements. Maybe we will have like even larger sensors, and then like different sensor stabilization methods that need a lot of magnets around the sensor, so that also always increases size. So I know a lot of people have said like, oh, the iPhone camera is good enough, oh, the iPhone is more than large enough. However, I still have to say, like, the way they're wording this here is extremely positive to me. Mark Gurman saying it's the larger size will help facilitate improved camera hardware or bigger internal batteries. Now, this is a little bit, I think, him hedging his bets, because if you know this, you pretty much know that this is basically a wash. Like, Apple can increase battery sizes by making the device overall like a millimeter thicker, like even like half a millimeter thicker, even a quarter millimeter thicker, and that would basically also reduce like the camera bumps, which the people really hate. So I don't think that this is primarily a change for bigger internal batteries. However, overall, and I apologize once again for not having dark mode on this website. As you can see, this is not an internal, like a device measurement change that will make the device substantially less comfortable to hold. When you look at it here, right? Yes, this is a long 5mm increase, actually a little more of a 5. But this is a 0.5mm increase. So even if you consider the different aspect ratios, like that this is basically 2 and this is basically 1, even though it's actually a little more than that, right? We're looking at a 5x difference where this grows by 0.5 to its 1, and this grows by 5 to its basically 2 aspect ratio. Stupid math, I know. I could be wording it more correctly, but I hope you understand what I mean, and I try to also like basically explain it with its impact on the dynamic island. And even when you consider stuff like that here you always have like your menu button, I always forget what it's called, like that down here basically that controls like your multitasking and stuff. Like all of it will be basically much more immersive. You will have a lot of screen space more on your regular website. As you swipe up and down, you will need to swipe less up and down, right? When you turn it sideways, the dynamic island is less likely to interfere with your video, and if it does, it still does it at a lesser ratio than it did before. And then hopefully on the back we have everything like titanium, which also is supposed to be coming like maybe only to the iPhone 15 Ultra. So I hope that with a size increase it also at least comes now to all Pros with the 16 series. And of course like a slightly rounded back, which would make it more comfortable to hold and basically unify a lot of iPhone generations in design. But I hope obviously obviously to have a lot more data on design changes and material changes as we get closer to the actual iPhone 15 announcement. And then I will be reacting once more, and then the Mark Tech Check will return once we go back to once we have the WWDC. Then you will get a lot of individual videos from me breaking down the content that we see at WWDC. And then Mark Tech Check at the beginning of the week after WWDC, summarizing a lot of my early impressions and stuff like that. And afterwards you will actually keep getting a lot of content where I'm not obviously trying to copy Zolotech, who does amazing iOS beta breakdowns, but I will be obviously reacting every time there are some major changes in iOS 17, iPadOS 17, the next version of macOS, etc., as Apple keeps updating their betas. So yeah, please let me know if you are looking forward to even larger iPhones. Do you think that the benefits are outlined are worth it, or do you think I was too positive? Are you like me, a little disappointed that the iPhone 15 Pro Max will not be getting a larger main sensor this year? Or do you basically not care and hope to just not get even larger and even uglier camera setups on the back? I'm looking forward to all your feedback, both on my content and obviously the content that I'm covering, what you think of Apple's latest moves, what you're most looking forward to, and please let me know what you would like to see me comment on next. Please let me know if you still enjoy this type of live stream content. This is obviously a much smaller video than the last one, but I hope that will also help it do a lot better. And once again, Mark Tech is so grateful for all your support. Mark Tech once again is talking about himself in the third person because he is tired, but I'm seriously so grateful, guys. Like basically like increasing subscriber count by 10% in a day, having like a video now that hit 3,000 views. I hope to keep this train going. I hope you all enjoy it as much as I do, and I'm always looking forward to constructive feedback. This is Mark Tech saying once again thank you, and tune